voice from across the Federation, spanning the region and covering the globe. This is the KyssFM SKN News Now Morning Edition, your one true source for news. And now your presenter.
Good morning. Today is Wednesday, 14th March 2018. I'm your presenter, Javon Liebert, and these are your top stories. Nationally, the government is denying that it is a non-compliant tax jurisdiction. Internationally, British scientist Stephen Hawking has died at age 76. And in sports, Simona Halep says Serena Williams should have been top seed at Indian Wells. We'll also have a look at today's updated weather forecast and Carib update. Now for a look at the news in detail. The government of St. Nevis is rejecting and distancing itself from news which broke this week that the Federation has been added to a European Union list of non-compliant jurisdictions for tax purposes. On Tuesday, the Economic and Financial Affairs Council of the EU adopted the Council's conclusion on the EU's list of non-cooperative jurisdictions for tax purposes. Based on the criteria set out by ECOFIN, the Economic and Financial Affairs Council of the EU, the determination of whether a country is cooperative for tax purposes is based on the territory's tax transparency, fair taxation, and implementation of anti-BEPS measures. In St. Nevis' case, country was blackballed for facilitating a preferential tax regime and over concerns by the EU that the Federation has failed to comply in respect of fair taxation, where a jurisdiction should have no preferential tax measures that could be regarded as harmful, and a jurisdiction should not facilitate offshore structures or arrangements aimed at attracting profits which do not reflect real economic activity in the jurisdiction. This is a direct reference to the Federation's existing tax regime as it applies to provisions for offshore companies. In response, Financial Secretary Hilary Hazel said on Tuesday afternoon that St. Nevis does not consider itself to be a non-compliant and has in fact taken measures to ensure that it complies with the international standards on transparency and exchange of information for tax purposes.
During the process of engaging with the EU, concrete commitments were made by the Federation to amend the relevant legislation to address the EU's concerns. The Federation remains optimistic that these commitments would persuade the EU partners to remove the Federation from the list of non-cooperative jurisdictions for tax purposes and allow for a framework of cooperation and dialogue moving forward. St. Kitts and Nevis does not consider itself to be non-cooperative. On the contrary, the Federation remains committed to the international standards on transparency and exchange of information for tax purposes. This is evidenced by a largely compliant rating by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Further, St. Kitts and Nevis has continued to expand its exchange of information network and is a signatory to the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance for Tax Matters. St. Kitts and Nevis signed and deposited the instrument of ratification for the convention on August 25, 2016. Additionally, legislation was passed by the National Assembly in December 2016 to provide for the implementation of the Common Reporting Standard.
Despite these measures, the reality is that the Federation has been cited by the EU. However, Mrs. Hazel says that St. Nevis will ensure that it fulfills the EU tax compliance requirements before the deadline of 31st December 2018.
Based on the commitments given by St. Kitts and Nevis to date, it is clear that St. Kitts and Nevis is a committed and fully cooperative jurisdiction in the context of international tax transparency. In addition, In respect of the commitment specifically given to the EU, we anticipate a series of actions to be taken to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis addresses the EU's current concerns within the stipulated timeframe of 31st December 2018. In this regard, St. Kitts and Nevis will continue to undertake a comprehensive review of its legislation with a view to addressing the deficiencies, including amending relevant legislation in accordance with best practice in international tax matters.
Southern Illinois University SIU is facing a lawsuit from 3 individuals, 2 of whom have indicated that they were injected with an unauthorized herpes vaccine in St. Kitts. The individuals are demanding compensation from SIU for alleged adverse side effects they are experiencing from the experiments. The lawsuit, which was filed Friday in an Illinois Circuit Court, also alleges that the experiment violated U.S. and international laws aimed at protecting the rights of participants in human experiments. Alan Milstein, a New Jersey lawyer representing the 3 participants, said his clients believe they should receive compensation not only for the medical costs, but also for pain and suffering and loss of dignity. Milstein said he is still exploring legal options against the university, which shared in the vaccine patent, set up a business account to collect donations for Halford's research, and promoted his work. The lawyer added that his clients are also particularly anxious to ensure such unethical experimentations on human subjects is not repeated. It was in 2016 that Professor William Halford, a former researcher at SIU, injected a number of Americans with his experimental vaccine in St. Kitts without the authorization of international health organizations or safety oversight, which is routinely performed by the Food and Drug Administration or an institutional review board. Meanwhile, the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force is still conducting an investigation into allegations that the experiments were conducted in St. Kitts and Nevis. Both Prime Minister Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris and Minister of Health Honorable Eugene Hamilton have stated that they were not aware of the experiments, nor were they aware of how the vaccines were able to pass through borders undetected. Internationally, one of the world's greatest scientists, Stephen Hawking, has died at age 76. His work focused on the evolution of the universe, and his book, A Brief History of Time, was an international bestseller. In a statement, his children paid tribute to their father, saying he was an extraordinary man whose work and legacy will live on for many years. Emma Haywood looks back on his life and achievements.
His was a life of applause and accolades. Stephen Hawking was often treated like a rock star scientist. Millions revered him for his gift of communicating complex matters to the masses, the common man's genius.
We are alive. We are intelligent.
Hawking decoded some of the most enigmatic mysteries of the universe, its origins, structure and end, from Big Bang to black hole. His life was also an enigma. 1963, Hawking was almost 21 and a student at Cambridge University when he was diagnosed with ALS, a degenerative motor neuron condition. He was given just 2.5 years, but went on to live for more than half a century.
It taught me not to pity myself, because others were worse off, and to get on with what I still could do. I am happier now than before I developed the condition. I am lucky to be working in theoretical physics, one of the few areas in which disability is not a serious handicap.
As the disease progressed, Hawking lost mobility and had to rely on a wheelchair. His speech then began to slur, and an emergency throat operation robbed him of his voice, but not for long.
Space, here I come.
Hawking turned to a speech synthesizer, which allowed him to select words by moving the muscles of his cheek. It was a tedious process, but one that gave him the ability to express his pioneering ideas. It also gave the British cosmologist his trademark American accent.
There have been a few setbacks, like the Dark Ages.
Hawking was respected early on in scientific circles for helping prove the Big Bang theory, when the universe burst into existence 14 billion years ago. Global acclaim came in 1988 with the release of his book A Brief History of Time. The introduction to cosmology was a runaway hit, selling more than 10 million copies and eventually translated into dozens of languages. Hawking's fame only magnified with time. A pop culture figure, he guest starred on shows such as The Simpsons and Star Trek.
You are bluffing.
Wrong again, Albert.
The fluorescence in the washing powder is caught by the...
Public fascination with Hawking culminated in the blockbuster Hollywood film of his remarkable life, The Theory of Everything.
The universe is expanding. If you reverse time, then the universe is getting smaller.
Stephen Hawking devoted his life to seeking answers to the questions of our existence, and in doing so, he helped us to peer deeper into how our universe works.
In sport, Serena Williams should have been given top seeding at Indian Wells on her return from the birth of her daughter, says world number one Simona Halep. Williams has no official ranking after spending a year off court, which means she cannot be seeded for WTA events. However, she can gain entry to 8 tournaments in 12 months, including 2 Grand Slams with her protected world number 1 ranking. Halep said she thought Williams should have been ranked as she left. Speaking after her 4th round win over China's Wang Qiang, Halep said, "To give birth is the best thing in the world. It's more than a sport. I think she should have been actual number 1 seeding in this tournament because she left as number 1 in the world." The Romanian was in the stands for the Williams sisters' 3rd round match in California, which Venus won 6-3, 6-4. Halep's coach, Darren Cahill, tweeted during a conversation with former world number 1 Chris Evert that returning female tennis players should not be penalized for giving birth by starting from 0. And now for a look at today's weather forecast. Today will be partly sunny with a 30% or low chance of showers. Tonight will be fair to partly cloudy with a 30% chance of low chance of showers. Winds are southeasterly at 9 to 17 miles per hour. Seas are moderate with waves 1.5 to 1.8 meters or 5 to 6 feet. Small craft operators should exercise caution. The sea level pressure is 1018.3 millibars. The sun will rise tomorrow at 6:19 a.m. and set to that 6:21. That item brings us to the end of KyssFM SKN News Now Morning Edition. Now for a recap of this morning's stories. The government is denying that it is a non-compliant tax jurisdiction. Internationally, British scientist Stephen Hawking has died at age 76. And in sport, Simona Halep says Serena Williams should have been top seed in Indian Wells. Thanks for tuning in for another news item. Now, I've been your presenter. Stay tuned. Carib Update is next.